My name is Cathy Schwemm. I currently am an ecologist working for the Institute for Wildlife Studies, which is a nonprofit organization based in Humboldt, California, that works on all range of wildlife and natural resource conservation issues.
And what's the best part about your job?
The best part about my job right now is that I am currently working on projects that address natural resource issues in probably 20 different national parks.
Wow.
I work on all of these different parks that have very different conservation and natural resources challenges to protect their resources. But the fun part is working with all the different people and learning a lot about all the different parks. Okay. And that I can do it anywhere on my computer. And what I'm working on are projects that look at a set of selected resources. So for example, in Zion, we've got about 30 different resources, including plants, animals, water quality, air quality. And my job is to, if I'm writing the document, is to do all the background research, to look into the literature, to talk to the experts, and then we do what our condition assessments. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at these resources to determine sort of what condition they're in. Are they doing well? Are they not doing well? Why aren't they doing well? And what do we need to improve our ability to protect them?
Okay.
So it's a very, very science-based, what I do. And then I provide all that back to the park, all the information, and then they use it for planning and resource management and restoration and things like that. The rewarding part is when we work on these documents, and they take a couple years, each one, and when they're done, they're 200 or 300 pages, which would sound like a terrible, onerous government report. But when we do it right and return it to the park, the managers in the parks, the natural resource managers, when they get it back and they say, this is going to be very helpful, this is going to help me do my job, their job being to protect the resources in the parks, and that this is something that they'll use and that they'll read, and that me and the other people that I work with have provided them information that they wouldn't otherwise have, not because they couldn't do it themselves, but they just don't have time. Yeah. So the most gratifying part is for them to say, thank you, this is very helpful, this is great information, and I'm going to take this report that normally people wouldn't read, but I'm going to read it and I'm going to use it. And then in another year, I can be able to measure against what you've done to see if we are really making progress.
When you were younger, did you visit any of these national parks?
So yes, they took us to the national parks every year. We went to the Grand Canyon and Yosemite and the Tetons and California. And yes, would I have been doing this without that? Probably not. So going to the parks when you're young, I think turns a lot of people into parkies.
What stood out to you when you would just go to these events? Was there any specific memories that that stood out to you?
And there was one time specifically that when I can tell you about, but I was a junior in high school, but there was just something about being there and looking at the mountains or the Grand Canyon or Yosemite or Yellowstone or even those little ones. And there was just something about it that people who appreciate nature and gain something from being in nature, you just get it. You just know that this is important. This is really important. And there aren't a lot of places. I mean, they seem huge, but they're really not. They're small. So just going there and appreciating how important and wonderful they were before I really knew anything about it. And I thought, yeah, I want to work there. I want to go there. I want to go there all the time. So I guess it starts out as I just want to do this because it will be fun. And then, of course, over time, you realize that it's also important.
And when you were younger, around 8 to 14, what did you imagine you would do for work?
Oh, the standard veterinarian, something with animals, maybe nurse. I thought about being a nurse for a while. But something outside, definitely something in science, sort of. I didn't really know what that was. Something with animals. And that was about all. That's kind of what a lot of us thought at the time, but I was pretty set on it for a while. When I was in high school, we moved from a suburb of Chicago to a little town in the middle of Illinois for my dad's job. It was a very small school. It was in the middle of the farms. And my sister and I were just We did not want to go, I'll tell you for sure. But we didn't have, so we went there, this little small high school, and my biology, and basically then they kind of just said, oh, when they just put us in these classes. Because we had like 2 weeks before school started. Anyway, my biology teacher was a woman. She was probably at that time in her 50s. And I hadn't thought about biology. It was just science. I just had to take it. Turned out I got to know her pretty well. She was when she was a girl and very young and in high school herself, she wanted to be a doctor. So if she was 50 years old in the 70s, then this was the 30s, probably 30s and 40s. And she wanted to be a doctor, and her father said, no, women don't become doctors. Women can't be doctors. So she became a biology teacher. And in her class, there were very certain ways that things were done. And the one I really remember was a bug collection, an insect collection that we had to do. So we had to go out and collect several different, like 30 different orders of insects. I don't know if you've ever learned that. But not only did we have to collect them, but then we had to pin them in at the time, a cigar box. Oh, okay. And you had to pin them exactly correctly through the right side of the thorax. And then we had to make little tiny labels, and we had to write really small, and we had to pin them just exactly right. And then we had to make diagrams, and every diagram had to have straight lines only and no lines crossing and labeled just perfectly. And pretty much everyone else in my class thought this was ridiculous and silly, and they hated it. I loved it. I don't know why, but just something about, there's a way to do this. There's a certain order. I didn't like killing the bugs. But that said, I had to do it just right, and I got into that, and something about the science of biology spoke to me, and that sounds weird, but this made sense. It made perfect sense, and I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do it right, and I wanted to learn more about the bugs, and I wanted to learn more about where the bugs were living. I remember going out in a field by our house one day, and now that I was looking at the bugs, they were everywhere, and there were all different kinds, which I normally would never have seen before. And of course, my mother was like, "Don't get those bugs out of the house." No, I got to do this. Yeah. And for some reason, that class, when I was junior in high school, I hadn't thought about it. I wasn't really, I wanted to be a veterinarian, right? I liked animals. Who didn't? But this showed me what science was, my first introduction to science. And so that teacher, that woman, she was a little strict and she was a little cold because most kids didn't get her. But I got her, and she was amazing to me and so helpful. And then when I went, the end of the weird story was the next year we actually moved back to the town we had moved from, and I went back to my other high school to graduate, and I had another science teacher, a biology teacher, and he was the same. And so I had two. It was lucky for me because the series of science was different in the two schools. So in the small town school, we took biology as a junior, but at the big high school, we took biology as a senior. So I got to take it twice. Yeah. And I loved the dissection, and it just sort of came to me. I wasn't really out looking for it. So that's not something that you can sort of get on your own. It just it was there, and it came at the right time and with the right people. Neither of my parents are scientists at all. They didn't know anything about it. So I was sort of on my own path at that point. So having those teachers made a lot of difference. What's that interesting and unique and fun part about science? And it's discovery and curiosity. And that's how every scientific discovery has been made, by someone asking a question. Wow, how does that work? Or why doesn't that work? Or where did that come from, or something? What advice would you give to yourself when you were first inspired? Go out and find people that can inspire you or give you experience. Talk to people, get help, get mentors, get advice, and don't feel stupid. Don't feel stupid doing it. Don't feel like, you're taking up their time. That's what they're there for. So that would be one piece of advice I would give. If you could have a superpower, what would it be and why? To add hours into my day, if I could. Like, everybody else gets 24 hours, but today I'm going to have 30. And so I'm going to get ahead. I get 6 hours more than everybody else in the world.